Why do some men hold complete authority in their relationships, while others feel drained, diminished, and trapped by the very women they love? It's a paradox seen everywhere. One man makes a decision, and his partner follows with eagerness and respect. Another man hesitates, negotiates endlessly, and seeks approval for even the smallest choices, as if he were a child asking permission. Both men may have started from the same place. They both once carried natural confidence. They both attracted their partners with leadership, presence, and masculine energy. But somewhere along the line, their paths diverged. One retained control of the frame. The other surrendered it piece by piece, often without realizing it was happening. The difference is not luck. It is not about meeting a submissive woman versus a dominant woman. The difference lies in understanding one dark psychological truth. Every relationship is, at its core, a battle for frame. Whoever holds frame dictates the direction of the relationship. Whoever loses it becomes a follower. Frame is more than confidence. It is the authority to define the terms, the structure, and the meaning of the shared life between two people. It shapes where you go, how you spend time, what behavior is considered acceptable, and who sets the rules. In every relationship, someone's frame dominates. When a man maintains his frame, he leads with clarity and strength. When he loses it, he becomes subordinate in his own life. Here lies the brutal truth. Women do not want equality in the sense most men imagine. They don't desire a partnership of endless compromise where every decision is negotiated. What women crave, what sustains attraction, is the presence of a man they can respect enough to follow. When a man fails to uphold this role, she does not feel liberated. She feels burdened. She resents him for being weak enough to hand her the leadership she never wanted to carry. Philosophers noticed this long before modern psychology. Arthur Schopenhauer, writing more than 2 centuries ago, observed that power in human affairs is never gifted. It is always taken. The person who shows they can be controlled will eventually be controlled completely. The same law applies in intimate relationships. Think back to how most relationships begin. In the early days, it was the man who made the first move. He initiated the approach, planned the first meeting, chose the place, set the tone. His leadership created the dynamic that sparked her attraction. She responded not because he sought her approval, but because he demonstrated direction. But over time, many men reverse this pattern. Slowly, imperceptibly, leadership changes hands. She begins to decide the social plans. She sets the limits on what's acceptable. She manages the finances. She becomes the authority figure while he becomes the compliant partner. This shift rarely happens in a single moment. It is the result of thousands of small surrenders. Each one seems trivial in isolation, but together they erode a man's frame completely. Saying yes to avoid conflict, changing plans to accommodate her moods, apologizing for things that weren't actually wrong. Each small act communicates a message. You can influence me. You can steer me. You can override my judgment. And with each repetition, she learns that his authority is negotiable. Over months and years, this accumulation of compromises transforms the relationship into a power imbalance. The man believes he is being caring. The woman interprets it as weakness. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the dark side of the self that people refuse to acknowledge. For many men, the shadow of relationships is the realization that they have become dependent, needy, and powerless in the very dynamic they once led. They become what they once swore never to be. Men who cannot make decisions without permission. Men who surrender their independence to avoid disapproval. What makes this even more insidious is that women rarely seize control directly. They don't storm into the relationship demanding authority. Instead, they create emotional circumstances where surrendering feels like the loving thing to do. They use what seems like care, vulnerability, or disappointment as a lever to shift control in their favor. This isn't conscious plotting. It is instinct. Women are wired to test men's strength. They do it through emotions, through subtle manipulations, through conflict. If the man resists, she feels secure. If he collapses, she loses respect. And once respect erodes, attraction follows. The result is a painful trap. The more he sacrifices to make her happy, the less happy she becomes. The more he bends to avoid conflict, the more she resents him. He believes he is choosing peace. She sees him choosing weakness. And nothing kills attraction faster than weakness disguised as love. One of the most destructive forces in relationships is a cycle few men recognize: the systematic testing of their strength through emotion. Women rarely seize authority openly. Instead, they use patterns of behavior that pressure a man to surrender his frame, not out of cruelty, but out of instinct. Their biology pushes them to find out whether the man they are with can be relied on. The process unfolds in stages. It's not random. It follows a predictable pattern that psychologists and relationship observers have noted for centuries. I call it the PCA sequence. Pity, shame, anger. Each step increases pressure. Each is designed to probe a man's boundaries until they either hold firm or collapse. The first stage is pity. She presents herself as the victim of his decisions. The tone is soft, often sad. "I just wanted us to spend more time together, but I guess your friends are more important." The message beneath the words is simple: if you loved me, you'd sacrifice for me. For many men, this is a nearly impossible trap to resist. Their protective instincts awaken. They see her distress and immediately assume responsibility for fixing it. Without realizing, they trade their own priorities for her comfort. But pity is only the beginning. If it fails, she escalates to shame. Here the language sharpens. It becomes about his identity, his adequacy as a man. A real boyfriend wouldn't act this way. Other men treat their girlfriends better. Maybe you're just not ready for something serious. Shame cuts deeper because it questions not the behavior, but the essence of the man himself. It suggests that his natural desires and decisions are evidence of failure. Most men cannot endure this kind of attack. To escape the discomfort, they surrender. They compromise to prove they are good enough. If pity and shame don't succeed, the final stage is anger. But it's not the loud, explosive anger men often recognize. Female anger is colder. It arrives as silence, withdrawal of affection, threats to reconsider the relationship. It's not about emotional release. It's a calculated pressure designed to make life so uncomfortable that giving in feels easier than standing firm. This is psychological warfare, subtle but relentless. Together, these three stages create a system that conditions compliance. Just like an animal trained with rewards and punishments, the man learns quickly that resistance brings tension, while surrender brings temporary relief. Over time, he adapts. He stops making choices independently. He waits for her cues, anticipates her moods, and censors himself before conflict even arises. The tragedy is that this cycle isn't necessarily conscious on her part. Women aren't plotting step by step. These patterns are rooted in evolution. For thousands of years, survival depended on choosing a man strong enough to withstand pressure. A man who could not stand up to emotional storms was unlikely to stand up to real threats: rival men, predators, hunger, or danger. So testing became hardwired. The woman pushes, consciously or unconsciously, to see whether he bends or holds. And here's the cruel irony. When a man resists when he calmly holds his ground, even if it upsets her, her respect grows. She may argue in the moment, but attraction deepens. When he surrenders, hoping to keep her happy, her respect erodes. She may thank him outwardly, but desire quietly fades. Most men never see this dynamic clearly. They believe that love means self-sacrifice, that partnership means compromise at all costs. They interpret pity as genuine need, shame as moral correction, and anger as evidence of pain. They don't realize they are being tested. And with every failed test, they train her to see them as weak. The longer this goes on, the deeper the trap becomes. By the time a man notices that he no longer makes decisions, that his needs are secondary, that his confidence has disappeared, it's often too late. The attraction that once fueled the relationship has collapsed. He thought surrender would bring peace. Instead, it destroyed the very foundation of respect. Women don't lose attraction because men are unkind. They lose attraction because men prove they cannot hold the frame. And frame, once lost, is painfully difficult to regain. The collapse of frame rarely happens in one dramatic event. It happens through a series of small concessions, each one so minor that it seems harmless at the time. A weekend with her friends instead of yours. A canceled night out because she didn't feel like going. A financial decision adjusted to avoid an argument. None of these feel like disasters on their own, but stacked together over weeks, months, and years they tell a story. A man surrendering his authority, piece by piece. This is how leadership erodes. Not through explosions, but through erosion. It's like a river cutting through rock. Persistence beats resistance. And each small surrender communicates one thing: your will can override mine. The moment that pattern becomes established, it becomes precedent. And precedent, once set, is incredibly difficult to reverse. Men often believe these small sacrifices are demonstrations of love. They think they are proving care, generosity, or maturity, but in reality, they are proving pliability. And pliability, in the female psyche, reads not as kindness, but as weakness. It signals that his priorities can be reshaped by pressure. Respect withers because the man no longer appears as a fixed point of strength. The dynamic deepens because attraction is linked to perception of authority. A man who appears independent, who can make decisions without seeking approval, radiates strength. A man who constantly seeks harmony at his own expense radiates dependence. And dependence is poison to desire. This principle can be captured in a simple truth observed by philosophers for centuries. The one who needs less controls more. In every relationship, the balance of power tilts toward the person least afraid of loss. The man who is willing to walk away maintains authority. The man who clings out of fear loses it. Women understand this intuitively. Even if they cannot articulate it, they sense it. When they see a man so invested in their approval that he cannot risk displeasing them, they know they hold the upper hand. And paradoxically, this does not bring them peace. It brings them resentment. Because the very dependence that gives them power also strips away the respect that sustains attraction. Think about the early days of most relationships. Back then, the man didn't worry about losing her, acted freely, set plans, lived according to his priorities. He attracted her precisely because he wasn't negotiating every move. His independence was magnetic, yet over time, emotional investment reshapes the psychology. Now he fears conflict. Now he fears rejection. Now his choices are made not from strength, but from anxiety. The irony is cruel. The more he tries to secure her by pleasing her, the less secure the relationship becomes. Because no woman respects a man who sacrifices his essence for her comfort. She may enjoy the control temporarily, but in the long run, control breeds contempt. She wanted a partner to follow. What she got was a subordinate to manage. This is why so many relationships end with a statement like, "You're not the man I fell in love with." The man hasn't changed his face or his body. What changed was his frame. He became malleable. He traded leadership for peace. He thought love meant surrender. She interpreted surrender as weakness. This is not about cruelty or malice on her part. It is about biology. Women are wired to seek men who can lead, protect, and stand firm under pressure. A man who cannot withstand her emotional storms cannot be trusted to withstand the world's storms. Testing, then, is inevitable. It is not sabotage, it's quality control. And here lies the paradox that ruins so many men. They try to end the testing by giving in. They believe that if they just say yes enough times, she'll finally be satisfied and stop pushing. But the opposite happens. The more he yields, the more she tests. Because every time he gives in, she grows less certain that his frame is real. True security in relationships doesn't come from harmony. It comes from consistency. A woman only relaxes when she knows beyond doubt that his boundaries cannot be broken, that his principles are real, that his frame is not for sale. Without this certainty, she will test endlessly, searching for proof. A man who grasps this truth sees conflict differently. He no longer views it as a problem to be avoided, but as an opportunity to prove his strength. He doesn't resent being tested. He expects it. And when he holds his frame calmly and consistently, he earns respect that no amount of accommodation could ever buy. Because in the end, the essence of attraction is simple. Women follow strength, not weakness. They respect the man who can withstand them, not the man who bends to them. They desire the leader, not the follower. The truth about frame battles is that they don't happen once. They repeat. They reappear in new forms, at unexpected times, and under different circumstances. And the reason is simple. Women aren't testing to be difficult. They're testing to be sure. Consistency is the only answer. A man who stands firm once, but collapses later, is not respected more than the man who collapses immediately. In fact, he is often respected less, because inconsistency creates uncertainty. It tells her that his boundaries are not rooted in principle, but in mood or circumstance. This is where many relationships fall into the most destructive psychological pattern: intermittent reinforcement. Sometimes he holds his ground. Sometimes he caves. Sometimes he leads. Sometimes he submits. The result is chaos. She never knows which version of him she will encounter. And uncertainty intensifies her testing. It's the same principle that makes gambling addictive. When rewards come predictably, interest fades. When they come unpredictably, the behavior seeking those rewards becomes compulsive. When a woman sometimes succeeds in breaking a man's frame, she is driven to try again and again, searching for that occasional victory. She cannot relax because she does not know if his boundaries are real. This is why the man who tries to balance leadership with accommodation fails. He thinks compromise will bring peace. In reality, it brings endless conflict. Because compromise without consistency is not leadership, it's confusion. And confusion kills respect. What women truly want is not tyranny, but reliability. They want a man whose decisions are guided by clear principles, not by fear of upsetting them. They want someone strong enough to withstand their storms without resentment, without panic, and without surrender. This doesn't mean being cruel, it means being steady. Authentic leadership in relationships doesn't look like domination, it looks like direction. A man with frame is not obsessed with control for its own sake. He is obsessed with mission, purpose, and integrity. His decisions come from who he is and what he stands for, not from the shifting winds of someone else's emotions. This is the difference between a tyrant and a leader. The tyrant demands obedience to his whims. The leader inspires trust because his choices are rooted in consistency and vision. Women may resist individual decisions in the moment, but they are drawn deeply and instinctively to men whose direction feels stable and purposeful, and this is why approval-seeking destroys attraction. A man who needs his partner's validation before acting is not a leader. He is a subordinate, and subordinates cannot command respect. Approval-based decision-making communicates dependency. It tells her that her moods define his choices. And no woman can feel safe or attracted to a man whose compass is her emotions. The most attractive men are those whose lives are already full. They have missions beyond their relationships. They have goals, values, and principles that exist independently of a partner's influence. They don't need companionship to feel whole, so they choose it to enhance what is already strong. This independence is what allows them to pass the hardest tests. Because when a man is rooted in purpose, he is not shaken by temporary conflict. He doesn't collapse under emotional storms, doesn't fear abandonment, knows his worth is not tied to approval, and his mission is not dependent on harmony. Ironically, this detachment creates the very security that women crave. When she sees that his decisions don't crumble under pressure, she relaxes. When she sees that his love doesn't mean surrender, she feels safe. When she sees that his frame is unshakable, she submits not because he forced her to, but because her biology responds to his strength. The man who understands this sees tests not as attacks, but as opportunities. Every boundary pushed is a chance to demonstrate integrity. Every conflict is a stage on which to prove steadiness. Every storm is a chance to reveal that his authority is real, not performative. Because at the core, respect and attraction flow from the same source: consistency. And consistency is only possible when leadership is authentic. A man who fabricates confidence will always break eventually. But a man rooted in true principles will not. He doesn't hold the frame because he's trying to impress her. He holds the frame because it's who he is. This is the essence of masculine strength, not domination, not control, not cruelty, but an unwavering commitment to live by principles, regardless of the emotional cost. That is the kind of strength women instinctively test for, and that is the kind of strength they cannot help but respect when they find it. The hardest truth for most men to accept is that their partner is resistance isn't cruelty. It's not even conscious strategy, it's biology. For thousands of years, women depended on men, not just for companionship, but for survival. They needed protection, provision, and leadership, strong enough to withstand real danger. Emotional testing was never about pettiness, it was quality control. That programming has not disappeared. When a woman pushes back against your decisions, questions your boundaries, or escalates conflict, she isn't trying to destroy the relationship. She's trying to measure it. She needs to know if the man she chose is still the man she can follow. She needs to know if his strength is real or if it was an act that crumbles under pressure. When men misinterpret this testing, they make fatal errors. They either collapse into submission, thinking it will buy peace, or they lash out in anger, thinking aggression will restore respect. Both approaches fail. Submission communicates weakness. Aggression communicates insecurity. The only path that builds respect is steadiness, calm, consistent leadership that does not bend under pressure but also does not resent the pressure itself. This is why many men feel attacked when they are actually being evaluated. They think the testing will stop if they just say yes often enough. In reality, the only way the testing ever stops is if you prove, through consistency, that your frame cannot be broken. Once she knows the answer, she no longer needs to ask the question. The irony is profound. The women who fight hardest against leadership are often those who most desperately want to surrender to it. But surrender is only possible when the man proves he is strong enough to be trusted. A woman cannot respect a man who folds at the first sign of conflict. Nor can she relax with a man who avoids decisions to keep her happy. Respect flows to the man who holds his ground with quiet confidence, who welcomes testing as proof of his worth, not as a threat to his comfort. This is why so many relationships collapse despite endless sacrifices from the man. He gives everything, thinking it will secure her loyalty. Instead, it secures her contempt, because the more he tries to make her happy by surrendering, the more miserable she becomes. She doesn't want control. She wants strength. She doesn't want to manage him. She wants to follow him. And when she cannot find that strength, she leaves. It's not always physically, but emotionally. She disconnects, withdraws respect, and eventually walks away. This is why women initiate the majority of breakups and divorces. Not because they were denied what they asked for, but because they were given everything they asked for and in the process, lost the man they once admired. The conclusion is stark, but liberating. Love without respect is impossible, and respect is not earned through compliance. It is earned through consistency. The man who holds his frame, who builds his life around mission and principle, who welcomes testing as natural, he creates a relationship that grows stronger with time instead of weaker. This is not about domination. It is not about cruelty or coldness. It is about authenticity. A man who truly knows himself and refuses to abandon that self for approval creates the only kind of relationship worth having, one built on respect, trust, and attraction that endures. In the end, you always have a choice. You can live for approval, seeking peace through surrender, and watch attraction die. Or you can live by principle, holding your frame regardless of storms, and watch respect grow. The first path leads to quiet resentment and eventual collapse. Second, leads to the kind of partnership where love is real because respect is real. If you found this exploration eye-opening, there is more to uncover about the hidden psychology of relationships. Subscribe for future insights into the unspoken dynamics that make or break attraction. Because the truth is simple. Women may speak in emotions, but their respect is earned only through strength. And in every relationship, survival belongs to the man who holds the frame.